listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? You magnificent bastard, I read your book. I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Of course you realize this means war. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where it is Tuesday, October the 6th, the year of our Lord, 2020. October. Holy moly. Where has the year gone? And at the same time, it's been the longest damn year in the history of history. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome again back to my show here in the Saloon, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled with a K, a mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast. It's the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, and palatial, sumptuous SHR Media Studios, I will be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur and brimstone as it emanates from that evil building downtown. And as per normal, be forewarned, what you're going to hear tonight for the next 2 hours consists of my opinion and my opinion only. Unfortunately, because of the fear porn that has gripped this nation, the Saloon is not open. Now I'm starting to wonder if it's ever going to open. But I want to let you know that I'm still serving stiff drinks, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the back door. Also want to remind you of this. We don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law, we talk about it all right here at the Saloon, where the speech is free, but the booze is not. A wonderful show for you, as per normal, segmented into 2 one-hour blocks. In the first hour, we have a returning guest, and I got a great response from the people that were listening live. I got a number of emails from people who said, hey, can you have this gentleman return? And so, unfortunately, he made the mistake of saying that he would return. So, back in the Saloon, I have Mr. John Truman Wolfe. Now, we spoke to him last on September, a little less than a month ago, on September 17th. And the first time I speak to a guest, it's kind of a shotgun approach. I like to know a little bit about the background of individuals. But now for the bulk of this show, what I'd like to do is concentrate on 2 very specific topics. And they'll be about the Federal Reserve. Essentially, what is it? What's its origin? What's its function? The other thing I'd like to talk about is the gold standard. And if we have time, and we may have time, I'd like to talk about the budget, the federal budget, because, let's see, it almost seems like the last time we had a federal budget was before there were rocks, before rocks inhabited the earth, because we certainly don't really, we don't have one now. By the way, so if you didn't hear the last show, John Truman Wolfe is a #1 best-selling and international award-winning author. His book that he's got out called The Coming Financial Crisis, A Look Behind the Wizard's Curtain, was a #1 Amazon bestseller. And I happened to order a copy of that. I'm waiting for that. He has another book called The 99 Strongest Banks in America. And what it does is it gives the purchaser almost 100 banks whose financial statements John Truman Wolfe has personally reviewed for their strength and prudent, smart fiscal management. Mr. Wolfe is also the editor and publisher of Strategic Financial Intelligence, a newsletter that I happen to sign up for. Let me stop right here. First, John Truman Wolfe, welcome back to the Saloon, sir.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me.
And thanks for being here this evening. The nice thing about this is that I discovered that you're in Southern California and you're up in the mountains somewhere. Last time we spoke, you're not being threatened by fires, so that was a great thing. The other great thing about this is that you're on Pacific time, just like me, so it's about 8:08 right now, and it's not after 11 o'clock like most of the guests that I talk to who happen to be on the East Coast. But when you were here, I had a big sort of a scattershot approach to all of this. Tonight, what I'd like to do is try to narrow this down and continue. You also have a weekly show yourself on CRN Talk Radio Network. It's called the John Truman Wolfe Financial Hour. And in terms of your CV, you were a senior credit officer for 2 California banks, one in the San Francisco Bay Area, the other one in Beverly Hills. You were the co-founder of the Los Angeles-based business management company Wiseman & Burke, where you oversaw the business and financial affairs of some of the biggest names in Hollywood. And you have a master's degree with honors from San Jose State University, and you are the former chairman of the Department of History at John F. Kennedy University. So clearly that is a very impressive CV. So again, welcome back to the Saloon, sir. And since we both happen to be in California, and we have not been released up in Sacramento County, where I am, in your area, is your county or region kind of released a little bit so people can go back to restaurants, that sort of thing? Or are you guys in the same doggone lockdown that we are up here?
I don't know exactly what you guys are suffering up there in Sacramento, Mark, but down here it's pretty restricted. There is dining only outside. So if a restaurant happens to be fortunate enough to have a patio where they can serve guests, then that's fine. There are a few restaurants around that have that, but many do not. The hair salons and nail salons are open. That's about it. These rules change. I mean, it's so psychotic, frankly.
It is.
It's like, okay, good. Well, you can get your nails done, but you can't go have a burger across the street. I mean, it's just, and you're within box soaring. Well, that's not a good metaphor. You're in spitting distance of the guy down the street, and the only plus to the insane dictates that are coming out of Sacramento is I think he is upsetting enough Californians that he'll get thrown out if he doesn't. I mean, the recall petition did make it on the ballot, Mark, if I'm not mistaken. So
we have, for those people who are unfamiliar with this, both John and I live in California, always spelled it with a K. And in California, we have what are called propositions. In other words, someone will have an idea, collect a sufficient minimum number of signatures, and attempt to get this idea on the ballot, and people vote for various things. It's Proposition 70, Proposition 20, etc. And there are a ton of propositions on the ballot, and that happens to be one of them. The other one that's extremely contentious right now is people who were basically, they were considered contractors, like people who drive for Uber or Lyft are considered contractors. So Uber and Lyft don't pay them health care. They don't pay them massive benefits. It's part of essentially the gig economy. And people who migrate to those things do it because they want to, because it's convenient for them. It fits their schedule. So, of course, Gavin Newsom, there's Proposition 22 on the ballot to make sure that the gig economy doesn't get removed. Because, as you can well imagine, folks, all sorts of unions are bleating and carping, saying that that's not fair because they are competing with taxi services. But somebody had a brilliant idea. People liked the idea. People signed up for the idea. And now California wants essentially its Merchant of Venice Shakespearean pound of flesh from all of these lovely individuals. Which reminds me, I'm going to have to start talking about the propositions that are coming up. Before we get into the two main topics, folks, I'm talking tonight to John Truman Wolfe, financial expert, author of any number of books about finances, has his own radio show about finances. And the next show, John Truman Wolfe, the next show that you and I have, what I'd like to do is not talk about finances. You are an author of a ton of novels. Sadly, none of them I have read, but between now and then, I'm going to order one, and I would like to have you back, not to talk about fiscal areas, but to talk about writing, being an author, your fiction, that kind of thing, because I love talking to authors as well.
Sure, be my pleasure. I've got a detective series, Private Eye series, and there's 3 in the series. I'm about halfway through the 4th one, and I love writing. Fiction is more fun to write, Mark, than nonfiction.
Oh, I'm sure.
It just doesn't sell as well. So, write a book on the real actions behind the global financial crisis, and you become a bestseller. Write about, like the first book in the series, the fiction series, is called Mind Games, and it's about the out-of-body psychic spy program that the CIA ran out of Stanford in the 70s and 80s. And that, what I just said, is true. Then I just spun a fictional story around that. But so I'd look forward to talking about that stuff.
Okay, so let me ask you this before we transition back into finance. If I were to pick up the first book to read of anything that you've written, would you recommend Mind Games? Would that be a good place to start, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good place to start. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. For tonight, we have the ability to focus a little bit more. And as I indicated and confessed on the first show, and I will be a confessor on the second show, is I know enough about finance to be terribly dangerous to someone who is interested in me. I started saving early. My dad was a brilliant guy. I didn't see him a hell of a lot when I was a kid. He was in the military, and we happened to move around, and he was gone most of the day. But when he was there, when I was young, what we would do is open the newspaper. Boy, this dates. John Truman Wolfe, this really dates. Back when you can open up the newspaper and look at the stocks.
Right. Yeah.
And he and I would choose stocks. And my dad started a portfolio for me when I was very, very young. So after having done that and predominantly not touched the bulk of those. Some went away, some companies dissolved, etc. That initial portfolio ended up being pretty darn impressive. So I got into it at the beginning, but my understanding of finance is not so good, not so very good. Having said that, I will confess I know almost nothing about the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, as I understand listening to people, is either a bit of a fiscal savior, or, as a lot of people have told me, it is the devil incarnate set out to ruin the nation. So I honestly, John Truman Wolfe, I honestly do not understand the Federal Reserve. So first, what is the Federal Reserve, sir?
Well, the Federal Reserve is this country's central bank. Every major industrial nation in the world, and even unindustrial nations, have central banks. Central banks, as a generality, are designed to control the economy of the country and manipulate the amount of money in the economy and the interest rates that get charged in the economy, and in that way kind of control the economy, because the amount of money or the price of it, to a very large degree, dictates how businesses operate. In this country, the Federal Reserve has a heritage that goes back to shortly after the founding of the country. I'm talking about the constitutional days, the founding. And there was the Constitution allows for or dictates that the money printed in this country should be done by the government, by the House of Representatives. But a central bank separate from the government was established, I forget what the exact year was, I think 1789. And it was backed and pushed by the Rothschilds, who were in England. And it got set up, and it had a life of, I think, maybe 10 years, something like that. And then that license expired, and then a second central bank was attempted to replace it under Andy Jackson, and that was one of the most contentious times in American politics. The only time in American politics as divisive as what we're experiencing now was the effort by the Rothschilds and other of their allies in the United States to get a central bank established outside of control of the government. Because if you can control a country's money, you control the country. And that PR war went on for some time. Jackson was elected basically on the platform of getting rid of the second central bank. I actually omitted something there. The second central bank was established, and I forget what the year was, and then it came up for renewal, and Jackson killed it. If I'm not mistaken, he killed it in 1832. And there wasn't a central bank in the United States for close to 100 years. And then in 1913, Morgan and Rockefeller interest and Rothschild interests established the central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, which is what exists now. And it has been in existence a little over 100 years. And it's outside of the control of the government. I mean, it's called the Federal Reserve, but it's nothing federal about it. The only tight connection to the government is the fact that the president gets to appoint the chairman. But the Fed, and I'm sure many of your listeners know this, they don't have any money. They just make it. They create it out of thin air. The government, the U.S. government, does financial planning backwards. They go, okay, how much are we going to spend this year? War, welfare, interest on the debt, how much? And they go, okay, good, $4.5 trillion. Okay, that's what we're going to spend. Now, what's the revenue? Oh, it's $3.5 trillion. Okay, good. Well, we'll borrow the rest. We'll borrow the $1 trillion shortfall, and they issue IOUs to borrow the shortfall. Those IOUs are called Treasury bills, or Treasury notes, or Treasury bonds. Each of those things has a little longer duration. The Treasury bills are short term. The Treasury notes are medium term, 2 to 10 years, and then the bonds are long term, 30 years. So they just borrow the money. It doesn't matter, frankly, whether it's a Republican-controlled Congress or a Democratic-controlled Congress. These people are debt junkies. They can't balance a budget. They can't stay within their revenue, and they borrow. And I'm sure many of your listeners are aware that the national debt, which is this pyramid of shortfalls, is now pushing 24 trillion, 24 trillion. I think it's 23.5 if I'm not mistaken. I may be off a little bit there, but not much. And it just continues to build. And we, meaning the taxpayers, pay interest on those borrowings, and the interest goes to the Federal Reserve. Now, the interest on $24 trillion is a piece of change.
I would yes, most definitely.
And the Fed does give some of that money back to Congress, and it keeps some. So it's this entity. There's a board of governors, the chairman of the New York Fed, and this New York. There are 12 different branches, and the one in New York is kind of the godfather. And the chairman of the New York Fed, a guy at this point named Jerome Powell, is kind of the king of the roost there. Our money should not be created by some non-governmental agency. It should be controlled by Congress. There should be a bank. This is my opinion now. There should be the functions of the Federal Reserve could be in the U.S. Treasury and overseen as it's stated in the Constitution. Anyway, long-winded answer to your question.
You mentioned T-bills, Treasury bills, that people, they've got debt. And so the first question when you mentioned that was, okay, who customarily will purchase a T-bill? Well,
investors will buy them. So will foreign governments buy them in the billions/trillions of dollars. So the biggest holder of government debt, I actually think it's Japan. I haven't looked recently. China's got $1 trillion worth of our debt, and they think, at least they try to control the U.S. government by saying, "Oh, good, we're going to sell the notes that we own, which will drive the price of the dollar down." It's funny, Mark. The bastion of free enterprise where we live is $23 trillion in debt. The largest communist nation on planet Earth has got $3 trillion in reserves. Is that bizarre or what? And of those $3 trillion in reserves, $1 trillion are government bonds and bills and so forth. It's really bizarre. Some a few years ago, when I first published the book that became a bestseller, and I actually had a different title to it when I started, and then we republished it. But a friend of mine got the book to some people. I don't know if I told you this before, but some friend of mine in Taiwan got the book to some people in Beijing, and she sent me an email. She said, the Chinese government would like to talk to you about the solutions in the book. I thought it was a joke, I said, okay, have them fly me over business class and put me up in this particular hotel. I knew some of the hotels in Beijing. And the next day she sends an email back, okay, good, they'll fly you however you want, they'll put you up wherever you want. And so the Chinese Communist Party flew me to Beijing. I spent a week there talking to, some reasonably senior people about solutions in the book that I had proposed. And among other things, they were seeking to back the yuan. The Chinese currency is called the yuan. It's also called the renminbi. It has two names. I don't know why. But they wanted to back it by gold. And China is buying gold in huge amounts still. They were then, and they are now.
Yep.
And they haven't gotten to the point where they back the yuan with gold, but they're making efforts in that regard. Anyway, interesting trip. And there's more to that story, but the Chinese, what brought this to mind was your question about the T-bills, and the Chinese government sitting on $1 trillion worth of our debt.
Folks, I'm talking to John Truman Wolfe. We had him on before. He's a financial expert in just about anything that you can possibly think of. I subscribe to his financial newsletter, and it's jam-packed full of stuff that, if you think that finance is dry, okay, in one aspect, yeah, it could be, but it impacts everything, and there's a ton of stuff in here. Now, I want to let you know this up front, and I said it before, I'll say it again. I do not have any fiduciary connection with John Truman Wolfe. He's not paying me. I'm not paying him. I have guests on my show that I think are interesting as hell. Moreover, that the guests, the people that listen, I should say, contact me and say, can you have these individuals back on again? Which is why I've asked Mr. Wolfe back on again. Let's see. We got about 2 minutes before the bottom of the hour break. I think I might be able to squeeze this question in. So, John Truman Wolfe, people that buy our debt may be looking to make some fiscal gains themselves. So I think that's kind of a striated question. Number one, can you actually do that? Can you make money on it? Number two, the first thing that popped into my head was, wait, doesn't this sound like a great way to acquire leverage over the United States of America? Buy their debt. And then, as you indicated earlier, when things go south, potentially hold it over our head.
Well, yeah, as I said, Mark, I mean, the Chinese have made threats in that regard. So have the Saudis, and that's another story I could get into. It's a really fascinating story.
Okay, I'll tell you what. When we come back, I'd love to hear it. I would like to hear it.
Good. All right. It's interesting, and it'll educate people on what's going on with the dollar. And people primarily buy government debt because the dollar is the world's reserve currency, not so much to make a killing on the interest, because the interest rates on U.S. debt instruments is very, very low these days, very low. Not as low as Europe, mind you, where they have negative interest rates, which we can explain after the break.
Okay, please. So, folks, we're talking to John Truman Wolfe. Had him on the show last time, September 9th, if I'm not mistaken. And when we get back, well, the focus tonight is the Federal Reserve, but this has ended up branching in any number of directions. So when Mr. Wolfe returns, I'd like to continue talking. He said he has a story that's pretty interesting about Saudi Arabia. So I'd like to hear that and the other topic that he just brought up. So hang on. We're going to have a break. If you need to go to the electric winkle chamber, now is the perfect time to do it. And I will be right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick Ubellis as host and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York. The Lid himself, Jeff Dunnett. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunnett.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Good evening. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show is featured on the SHR Media Network every Tuesday and Thursday night for 2 hours at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. Whilst manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ continues to radically change the world of leftists, one diaper at a time. Stop balancing your checkbooks. Stop cleaning your fish tanks. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show is your magnet for truth, justice, obesity, a darkened studio, and late-night freedom. No United States of America freedoms were abridged in the making of this ad.
This is Shannon Wright.
And this is Michael Wright.
Reminding you to listen
to The Right Way with Shannon and Mike.
Every Monday through Thursday.
7 to 9 a.m.
Right here on shrmedia.com.
Join me, Jack Alexander, for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense Elite radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian sackheads Clint, plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty void in Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back. During the break, if you happen to be on either Facebook or YouTube, you happened to glance seriously at my tech servant, who is Sackhead Sean, who is trying diligently to repair the echo that's on YouTube, and it's because we got a software update and we hadn't factored for the cameras. So anybody that happens to be in chat and on YouTube, can you kindly let me know if the echo in YouTube is gone? Because I believe it has. For the first hour tonight, we're continuing to talk to John Truman Wolfe. He is a fiscal expert. He was back, we had him back in September. And before things get too crazy, I wanted to focus, because after November 4th, folks, things are going to get just nutty. Absolutely just nutty. So I wanted to have him back on. Tonight we're talking about the Federal Reserve. And obviously a radio host himself, John Truman Wolfe, knows how to drop a teaser. So he said before the break that he had a story about Saudi Arabia. So, sir, can you tell us that story? It sounded very interesting.
It is interesting. At the end of the Second World War, 1944, Mark, the Allies, as the war was winding down, met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to restructure the global financial system. And out of that meeting, out of Bretton Woods, which is what the conference was called because that's where they were, came the World Bank, the IMF, to international organizations that had originally had positive purposes. They've now turned into global predators, but that's another story. But the U.S. became the kind of the king of the planet's financial system. Such that it was agreed that central banks around the world could turn in dollars for gold. The U.S. dollar became as good as gold. So it kept the dollar strong because the central banks around the world would gather up dollars because they knew they could turn them in for gold. And the government could overspend and send dollars out everywhere, and the central banks would vacuum them up and they would keep them in reserves. It was almost like having gold in their reserves. So that went on for about 25 years. In the late 60s, as we were pouring untold billions into the Vietnam War, and dollars were everywhere, Charles de Gaulle, who was not a fan of the United States, went, I'm not holding these dollars anymore. I'm turning them in for gold. He sends the French Navy to New York. He gets his gold. And then other European nations started doing the same, turning their dollars into gold. The U.S. gold treasury was falling like a rock. And so Dick Nixon did one of the smart things that he did, one of the few, whatever. It's one of the things that he did. He shut the gold window in 1971. Well, no more. We're not paying out any more gold. So, but that left the dollar in kind of a precarious situation because central banks had wanted the dollar because they were as good as gold. But now, if the dollars are out there in huge numbers, the value of the dollar is going to go down. And Nixon sends Henry the K to Saudi Arabia to talk to King Fahd, I think it was. And they make a deal. The deal is the United States guarantees to protect the Saudi oil fields from external or internal terrorists. They won't let their oil fields be attacked. In exchange, they tell the Saudi Arabians and the other OPEC nations to mandate that the purchase of oil be made in dollars.
Okay.
Well, countries need oil like a body needs oxygen. So the central banks resume their habit of collecting dollars and holding dollars because they need them to buy oil. First, Saudi Arabia does it, and then he gets all the OPEC guys to do it. And that arrangement is called the petrodollar. And that has kept the U.S. dollar strong for 50 years. The petrodollar arrangement is starting to come apart, which is another story that we could get into, but not right this second. I mean, it'd take a while. But the petrodollar is starting to fall apart. Russia and China have put together another economic organization called the BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Those countries are now doing international trade in their own currencies, which was unheard of some years ago. Anyway, that's the story of Saudi Arabia that I thought of when you asked whatever question you asked. I forgot what the question was, but that's a story of the petrodollar.
Having said that, folks, does that not answer a lot of questions with regard to our relationship with Saudi Arabia? A lot of people have been saying for quite some time, what's the special relationship between the United States of America and Saudi Arabia? It would seem to me that a good portion of that would be just as John Truman Wolfe delineated here, and you heard it first right here on the show.
There was a secret agreement, Mark, subsequently, that not only would they mandate that oil be bought in dollars, but quietly that they would take the oil-producing countries that got all this money from all these dollars would reinvest the dollars in treasury bills. So they're not only keeping the dollar strong, they're reinvesting it in our debt. And they did that for 50 years. About 3 years ago, there was a law that was going through Congress which said that American citizens had a right to sue Saudi Arabia for 9/11. And that bill went through Congress. Obama vetoed it, and Congress overrode his veto. But as the bill was going through Congress, the Saudi Arabians went, if that bill passes, and they broke this secret agreement that had been there for 50 years, we're going to dump $750 billion worth of T-bills on the market. The legislation passed. The Saudis didn't carry out their threat. End of story.
We lucked out on that one. There's a question in chat from Sergeant Booker, and he says, with all of these essentially convoluted machinations that have occurred over the years, how is it that the United States, hell, any nation, but primarily the United States, how do we, or how can we, come out of this? It would seem as though we don't recognize the first rule of holes. And so not recognizing common sense and in embracing continuous and apparently unstoppable debt, because no one apparently has the wherewithal in D.C. to even talk about this. John Truman Wolfe, how do we survive as a nation? And then after that, I want to go back to the gold standard a little bit.
Well, that's the question that people that at least think rationally ask and ask and ask. And it really, it hasn't been answered. For some years, I was in Washington. I did a bunch of work for a nonprofit up there. And that city, Mark, is psychotic. They're nuts. You can talk to a congressman or a senator, and most of those people up there are decent people. They are social personalities. But as a group, when they get into a group mentality, like this political party or that political party, they just lose their individuality. There are few legislators, in my experience and opinion, who have the integrity to stand up and put their feet down when they should, and that's what needs to be done. It's the real answer to the question. Some people, like Senator Rand Paul, will hold to his convictions, and he will hold to, this legislation goes through Congress. This is spending money we don't have, and he's almost the only one that's standing up, going, "No, don't do this. It's damaging to the country." So it's a bit of a stretch, but it can be done if people recognize that there are legislators with integrity, and we have to hold their feet to the fire. I don't have any other answer for it.
I hesitate in asking this question. John Truman Wolfe, would it be appropriate to ask the question then, sort of an if-then equation? If our dollars are not backed in gold, then couldn't it be said that how strong we are as a nation fiscally gets down to how people feel, our emotions in terms of confidence about our economy? Or am I completely misreading all of this?
No, you're not misreading it at all. It is what provides the confidence that when foreign nations or individuals in foreign nations or investors in foreign nations experience chaos in the financial markets, they do still turn to the dollar because we have as many holes as it has. We still have the strongest economy in the world, and it is in fact the confidence in that economy that keeps the dollar strong. Are you going to invest in the Chinese yuan with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, running kind of a quasi-capitalist, dictatorial economy? I don't think so. And the nations of Europe, the EU nations, Mark, the so-called pigs, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, they call them the pigs because their economy, if our economy is bad, theirs is much, much worse. So we remain the strongest game in town, but as a generality, the game is, decreasing. And the dollar, recently has been falling, and I don't know how else it could not fall, what else it could do, because the Fed is just making up trillions of dollars out of nothing. And, pretty soon people around the world go, you know what? That doesn't work. So I hate to say it. I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but I think inflation's coming. And in a big way, and that's why I'm a proponent of precious metals. And if you're getting the newsletter, you know that. I think it's one of the things that everybody should have, some precious metals.
As I was listening to you talk, one of the first things that came to, an individual in chat, Sergeant Booker, was saying, I'm starting to think the U.S. is only as strong as its printing press. Is that accurate?
Well, I would say no. I think the answer to that question is no, because what is behind the printing press is a nation. I mean, take the COVID economy out of the picture for a second. This nation was booming before that nonsense.
Yes, it was.
Mark.
Yep, it was.
And it's driven by. It's not driven by. Apple and Google and Amazon, although those corporations are huge and people can have their opinions about companies that big. But the engine, the economic engine of the United States is the small businessman or woman. They make up about 2/3 of the economic activity in the country. And it's why this shutdown is so devastating, because it's the small business person that's getting harmed. But if we can get back to where we were before this virus nonsense, we still have a strong economy, regardless of whatever printing the Fed does. The reason that the printing press has been effective is that it has enabled the Congress, the president, to make loans to people and so forth and so on. But that is not any kind of long-range solution, and I think most people recognize that.
Let's see. I got about Okay, I got about 10 more minutes before the top of the hour. Folks, we're talking to John Truman Wolfe. He's a fiscal expert, has a great newsletter that I ended up subscribing to, author of a number of nonfiction books about the economy, also author of a number of fiction books, one of which I'm going to pick up here in the not-too-terribly distant future, likely later on tonight. We're talking about the Federal Reserve. I'm going to wrap it up with one question that I think might be heretical. I'm not going to go there just yet. But I will ask Mr. Wolfe, is there a possibility, or would we want to go back to the gold standard?
Well, two different questions. I don't think there's a possibility of going back to the gold standard because I think the forces, the international banking elite would fight it so strongly, at least not in the foreseeable future. Would we want to go back? I think the answer to that is yes, because we had that 100 years or so ago. The real bottom line solution for money should represent production, Mark. It should represent the assets, the things that get produced. There should be enough money in circulation to buy what there is to buy. Money should be represented by goods and services. Lacking that, you could go to a gold standard. The fact of the matter is there actually isn't enough gold to provide, backing for the U.S. Currency, as there was 100 plus years ago. But I think people should own precious metals, because I think the price of gold and silver in particular are going to go up. And I'll take a half a second here and sound like a used car salesman and give a plug, because I make very specific recommendations in the newsletter, and that newsletter, folks, is strategicfinancialintelligence.com, strategicfinancialintelligence.com. And there are, not only does it make sense to buy bullion, but there are gold mines and silver mines, the prices of which are very reasonable. And I think those things are good for people as the precious metals start to soar here.
So am I reading you correctly? You're thinking that a physical asset would be something to have about this time. Precious metals, property? Yes,
particularly, I was just talking to somebody before the show. One thing would be REITs, real estate investment trusts, that specialize in agriculture. That would make a lot of sense. So, yeah, land that is productive.
Okay. I may as well hit you with the ultimate question right now, because I wrote a post on this maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And somebody asked me, it's because I saw a documentary on the television. And, okay, it got my brain thinking about lots of things. So it's alleged that Fort Knox holds 5,046 tons, 147.2 million troy ounces of gold. So the big question, Fort Knox, the bullion, the United States Bullion Depository in Kentucky is surrounded by an army base with a tank corps. Fort Knox is the representative of strength, solidity, etc. But with all the shenanigans that have gone around, and I know the government can't answer this, but I'll just throw it out to you, with all the incredible, convoluted, Machiavellian shenanigans that have gone on over the past 70, 100 years or so, do you think there's any gold in Fort Knox?
I wish I had that crystal ball, Mark.
Okay, see, here's the thing. Just your hesitation on that, to me, bespeaks volumes, which is why the government can't ever answer that question. And I posed it to you knowing full well our government never would.
Well, look, you're sensitive to what's going on there in Washington, as am I. I love this country. I think our government in general is nuts. That's not true of the president. I think that the president, while I think he ought to keep his mouth shut sometimes,
Yep.
I think he's been the most productive president in American history. He just ought to keep his Twitter account under wraps. But but Washington it's a nightmare. How do you spend $1 trillion a year more than you take in and then go borrow and borrow and borrow? These people are like heroin junkies, Mark. They can't stop borrowing because they want to give some kind of benefit to their voters and so forth. Their primary purpose is staying in office. So I think it's incumbent. I mean, from my perspective, I write and I talk and I do as much as I can to try and get my representatives to exercise some modicum of sanity. Now, unfortunately, you and I both live in a state that have two women senators that operate a little to the left of Mao Zedong.
Slightly, yeah.
Now I happen to live in a congressional district with Kevin McCarthy as my congressman, so I can do good in one place and not another. Anyway, we just have to keep pushing sanity and survival. And I think if enough people, I've done enough lobbying in Washington to know that if the public gets upset about something or they communicate strongly enough, it changes minds up there in Capitol Hill. Nothing can change minds like public opinion. And I think shows like what you're doing and the reason that I write my letter is to try and get them to adopt sane policies and not spend us into debt for the next 100 years.
John Truman Wolfe, is there another country in as extremis, I would say, as we are? You've said we know we're in very, very serious debt. Russia, China, are they as bad or even are they worse at this point?
Well, they aren't as bad. I mean, I've been to Moscow a number of times. I've spoken there. My book is published there. And they wisely, I mean, Putin, listen, we won't talk about Vladimir Putin's human rights record because it's a nasty subject. But he's not stupid, this guy. And they have a reserve policy there because their economy is driven almost entirely by oil. And if the price of oil goes down, their budget crashes, but they've got reserves set aside for that. So they do have debt. They are, unfortunately, very dependent on oil, but they're not economically, if you look at that, they're not as productive as we are as an economy, but in terms of their debt structure, they're not anywhere near as bad off as we are. China is much more in debt. They're currently, Mark, pushing the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, the Central Bank of China, is pushing the implementation of what are called CBDCs, Central Bank Digital Currencies, replacing cash with zeros and ones. 4 different cities in China are now operating on digital currencies. People are being paid by digital currencies, and China intends to lead the world in the implementation of central bank digital currencies, and the world's going that way. 80% of the central banks on this planet are in the process of testing, piloting digital currencies. Cash is going away, and it's one of the reasons that I recommend that people stash some precious metals.
I cannot see, honestly, John Truman Wolfe, anything but chaos and anarchy coming as a result of that. It leads to so many questions. I think the next time that I ask you back, it'll be either for your books, your fiction books, or just to get into a big discussion, as one of your newsletters did recently that I read, about the digital economy, why it's coming, all about it. We touched on it a bit last time, but boy, would I like to expand on that one of the times that you come back. So John Truman Wolfe, thank you ever so kindly for being here tonight. Can you tell people where you can be heard and or read, please?
Yeah, I will repeat what I said earlier. strategicfinancialintelligence.com is the newsletter that comes out once a month. In addition to that, people that subscribe to Strategic Financial Intelligence, I do, as you said, I do a radio show every week, and we transcribe the audio version of that and send it to the subscribers of the newsletter. And we also send the audio file of the radio show every week. So people get a monthly newsletter and then weekly updates of, sometimes I interview the CEOs of mining companies or, other experts in mortgages or banking or whatever. So with the newsletter, you get a lot of goodies.
Okie doke. John Truman Wolfe, thank you ever so kindly, sir, for being here tonight. God bless, take care, and be safe. What a ride we're in for. Thank you kindly, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Folks, that was John Truman Wolfe for the first hour. When we come back from the break, the entire second hour is going to be taken up with an SHR Media special report. What voter fraud? And would you suspect that I may have found a bit of voter fraud? The other thing that I want to tell you is, in the process of doing show prep for this, I made a discovery that was basically a concern, lied to the entire state of Virginia, I discovered. Some local media investigated it. And this concern got away with lies to the state of Virginia. BZ, what the hell are you talking about? Well, I'll tell you right after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right. We're back. So please join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. Only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It is he that is me, bringing perspective from across the sea. Join me, Jack Alexander, 4 days a week for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the news and issues affecting life and liberty here in the USA. I'll show you what the mainstream media refuses to. Politics, border security, defense, healthcare, travel, nothing is off limits. Catch the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast each Monday to Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere good podcasts can be found. Also, check out the website, www.jackalexanderexperiment.com.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellows as host, and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the unpleasant blind guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense Elite radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the unpleasant blind guy.
On ADL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we are back. It's the second hour. I can tell you right now, for better or for worse, I am anticipating some overtime. For those of you who may be... I just decided to stop that. For those of you who like extra time, I believe that you're definitely going to get some extra time out of this. Because this will be an SHR Media special report about voter fraud. As in, voter fraud? What voter fraud?
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
The leftists, Democrats, and the American media maggots, what I call the LDAM, have been telling everybody for quite some time that there is no voter fraud. So I decided to start this like the other one that I did about I've done some serious investigations recently into the coronavirus and also into why are we still locked up. And I decided to go into this because it's the bleat of the leftist Democrats and American media maggots that there is no voter fraud. So I went and started investigating, and I have something unique, which apparently a lot of them don't. I have the internet. So there isn't enough time or room for me to delineate and refute with every damn example the claim by leftist Democrats and American media maggots that there is no voter fraud. The examples are beyond legion. America itself, well, I'm going to go back with this that a lot of people conveniently forget. America itself has a history of obstructing elections. specifically under the, imagine that, Barack Hussein Obama regime. The first instance, if you recall, folks, would be that of Israel. The Jerusalem Post wrote back in 2013, Obama's shocking interference into Israel's election process. Benjamin Netanyahu received the invitation to address Congress from House Speaker John Boehner, if you remember him, he of the tanned face, shortly after President Obama had warned Congress in his State of the Union address that he would veto any move they may make to strengthen sanctions against Iran in pursuit of a nuclear weapon. If you remember, Israel had released a video showing that an undisclosed Iranian intercontinental ballistic missile site was in existence, and Netanyahu was concerned that the Obama administration was on its way to signing an agreement with Iran while Israel was embroiled in elections. So Netanyahu ends up accepting Boehner's invitation, and he comes over and he speaks. Furiously, the good Mr. Obama in the White House threatened there would be a price to pay for Bibi's visit to Washington. Then we discovered what that price was. So this was a running theme, okay, with the Barack Hussein Obama administration. Retribution, revenge. Obama was all about retribution, revenge, and particularly division, the hallmarks of his regime then and now. So the Obama presidential election team set up camp in Tel Aviv with the mission to defeat Netanyahu in that upcoming election in 2013. The Anyone But Bibi mission was headed by Jeremy Byrd, Obama's national field director in his successful presidential campaigns. Under Byrd, a group called Victory 15 was set up. It recruited the young activists from Israel's 2013 social protest movement, and from that, our money, through people associated with Barack Obama, attempted to upset an election in Israel. There's a second instance that occurred here in the United States of America, which I bet you don't remember, but I do, because that's why you listen to me. That's why you're paying the big bucks to listen to this show. Okay, there is no paywall. You already know that. The second instance would be that of this occurred under then Indiana Governor Mike Pence. This is from Daily Caller. It says, Obama's feds tried to hack Indiana's election system while Pence was governor. Why would they do that? Remember what I said about retribution and revenge? So it was through DHS, Department of Homeland Security officials. They tried to hack Indiana's state electoral system with at least 14,800 scans or hits between November 1st, 2016 to December 16th, 2016. The attacks are part of a second confirmed IT scanning assault by DHS officials against states that resisted then-President Barack Obama's attempt to increase federal involvement in state and local election systems by designating them as critical infrastructure for national security. And if you didn't go along with that, essentially, Obama sent DHS to hack into the state of Indiana's system. You remember, by the way, that Mr. Obama stated there can be no voter fraud and no rigged elections because they are so decentralized. Remember that insistence? Hold that thought. But remember, simultaneously, he wanted them centralized. Who actually attempted to hack American election infrastructure for punitive reasons and was caught red-handed? The DHS, NSA under Mr. Obama, because certain states refused to go along with the Obama administration's insistence that they do become centralized, when he just told us our strength is not being centralized. And imagine that. So what I'm going to do now is lay forth a ton of examples, some audio cuts and whatnot. There will be attributions. article after article, sources all over the United States, indicating that as opposed to what the LDAM, the leftist Democrats, and American media maggots tell you, that what they insist is, there's no voter fraud. Oh, yeah, there is. It does exist, and it is rampant. Now, with a couple of exceptions, I haven't gone into Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine. I've limited my searches to pretty much essentially 2016 and on. I can't go on for 3 hours just about this topic. Maybe one day I will revisit it, but tonight is not that night. The LDAM and the Gallups, guilty overeducated white people, are not going to listen to you if you insist that there's voter fraud. So that's why I'm here tonight, to have people that doubt it refer them to this show, to the podcast, and it's going to be up at Bloviating Zeppelin. 5-year-olds. Well, let's go back. Let's go back to voter ID, okay? You can't demand voter ID. Anyone and everybody should be able to vote for anything, anywhere, according to the LDAM, with no substantiation whatsoever or verification required at all. And essentially, 5-year-olds know that is a recipe for failure and corruption. And maybe I ought to, say I apologize to 5-year-olds for insulting them. Do you guys remember this? Do you remember Amy Horowitz? Do you remember what he did? Listen closely, if you would, to this. This is about maybe 4.5 minutes or so. And it's about...
I'm Amy Horowitz, and I'm here in Berkeley, California, to find out if voter ID laws suppress the black vote.
So he's going to Berkeley. Well, who's here? Mostly white people.
Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad. I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where
What a haughty piece of crap the British do.
They can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works. A lot of people have.
Black people don't have the knowledge of how it works. That darned internet.
Smartphones, we might not have data. For most of the communities, they don't really know.
Black people may not have smartphones. They may not have data.
Know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed.
They're not aware. They're not informed.
There's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African Americans.
Now I'm here in East Harlem to ask black.
You might want to ask the community of Cubans about that, girly.
Black people, their thoughts on what you just heard.
So now he's in Harlem. Now he's going to ask black people about that.
You have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. That's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy camera?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid can figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly,
Exactly.
right?
I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data? You can actually
Unlimited.
Unlimited data.
I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's why my thought process on it.
I just think that's ignorant. Ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the word I'm hearing a lot. Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
You're judging somebody, you're judging them because they black, saying that they don't got it.
What people are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are? Are you
Love
cool?
showing my ID.
You have no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if when you go to vote, if they say, can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are? Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you had to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Nah.
Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so wait. What we have is a situation where American blacks think that Gaups, which are guilty, overeducated white people, all the chicks and little boys in Berkeley and that elitist British piece of crap are saying about them is insulting them. Facts and evidence. So let's start by observing that in 2019, Tom Fitton's Judicial Watch had to sue the County of Los Angeles to do the job that the County of Los Angeles should have been doing for years and years. What voter fraud? So not just Los Angeles, every American city and every county in the United States of America should have been scouring their voter rolls and their lists diligently. When they're not encountering an election, what are your boards, local boards, doing if not scouring those lists? Nothing? Dude, packed and ancient voter rolls generally benefit whom? The Democrats. So Tom Fitton, as per normal, had to sue a government to get the government to do its own damn job. So a lawsuit from him spurred California to begin a massive 1.5 million inactive voter roll cleanup. So Tom Fitton, under Judicial Watch, is suing governments to get them to do their damn jobs. How insane is that? That's just nuts.
Hi, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with a special update on a new election integrity lawsuit we filed against California and Los Angeles over their failures to clean up their voter rolls. Federal law requires that states take reasonable steps to clean up the voting rolls, but that's not taking place in California. In fact, in many places, including in Los Angeles, they have more people on the rolls than are eligible to vote. Dirty voting rolls can mean dirty elections. And this lawsuit aims to ensure that the citizens of California can have more confidence that their elections will be fair and honest.
That is purposeful. So let's begin with one fundamental problem. Mail-in voting due to Wuhan 19. You know, the thing pushed by Democrats due to fear porn. You can't walk safely into the polls and expect to cast your vote, right? Well, I just played this not long ago. Dr. Fauci says you can.
Go out and vote in person, given that this year there is so much concern around the vote?
I think if carefully done according to the guidelines, there's no reason that I can see why that not be the case. For example, you know, when you look at going to a grocery store now in many regions and counties and cities that are doing it correctly, they have X's every 6 or more feet. And it says, don't leave this spot until the person in front of you left their spot. And you can do that. If you go and wear a mask if you observe the physical distancing and don't have a crowded situation, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that.
So the revered and worshipped Dr. Fauci, huzzah, says, yeah, as a matter of fact, you can vote in person. Well, if there's a poster child for I really shouldn't be voting in person, it's Joe Biden, who went to vote in person in the Delaware state primary. What? Joe Biden voting in person. Here he's coming out of the building with his wife, Jill. Probably, in my opinion, one of the worst persons on the planet to continue to place Joe Biden where he is today and endanger him, knowing full well what is occurring to him.
Biden, what's your message to Delaware voters ahead of the primary tomorrow? Vote. That's my message. What about your friend, Senator Cruz?
I like Cruz the best. He's a great senator.
So there's Joe Biden coming out of the polls, and he says, vote. But wait, the Democrats say you can't vote in person. So that's the marching order given to the American media maggots, which they carry with inspiration, pride, and glee. Anything to remove OMB. So CBS, I don't know where this came from. CBS, some wackadoodle at CBS got an idea up in their brain pan. Let's do an experiment. So they decided, let's try a vote by mail experiment. I'm not sure what they thought was going to happen, except this.
Not a campaign 2020. Many Americans are expected to vote by mail for the first time this November because of the pandemic. Across the country, rules vary for when you can get your ballot and when you should return it.
But there is one thing clear. You need to give it some more time than your state might recommend to get your ballot through the mail system. CBS This Morning's Tony DeCopel has more on an experiment CBS News set up to see how long you should give yourself to make sure your vote counts.
If you know how to mail a letter, you already know how to mail in your vote.
How you doing? Good, thanks. Thank you very much.
But how long might it take for that vote to actually arrive and be counted?
Have a good afternoon.
We decided to test it, sending 100 mock ballots simulating 100 voters from locations all across Philadelphia to a P.O. box we set up to represent a local election office. A couple days later, we mailed 100 more, using the same size envelopes and the same class of mail as real ballots here.
So what you don't see in the video is that this guy is walking around to a whole bunch of different official U.S. Postal Service mailboxes and just shoving them in the door.
To approximate the weight, we even folded mock votes into every one. In the following week, we checked our P.O. box for the results.
Mail pickup notice, there's more.
When we went to collect everything, though...
Listen.
Nothing?
She says, I don't see anything back here for you.
Most of our votes seem to be lost.
That's all I have back there right now. You're sure? You're totally sure? I believe you. All right, then. Have a good day. Okay, take care.
We had to ask for a manager.
We're trying to do something about mail-in ballots.
And explain ourselves before someone finally found our votes.
Oh, look! Here they are! We finally found them after you complained.
They have me somewhere else. Okay, thank you.
1, 2.
We soon discovered another problem, missorted mail. 2 pieces of it.
We got a birthday card from Mike to Ronnie. Have a sweet B-day. Get it? There's a B on top.
When the birthday greetings ended,
12, 13.
We found a bigger issue. 21% of our votes hadn't materialized after 4 days. And the batch we'd mailed a week prior, some of those were missing too.
So of our 100 ballots, 97 arrived, which sounds pretty good, unless you consider the fact that that means 3 people who tried to vote by mail in our mock election were in fact disenfranchised by mail.
In a close election, 3% could be pivotal, especially in what's expected to be a record year for mail-in voting.
We're going to see somewhere between probably 80 and 100 million voters receiving their ballot that way.
The Postal Service says voters should mail their return ballots at least 1 week prior to the due date. But nearly half of all states still allow voters to request ballots less than a week before the election. so you can...
That's stupid. Request a ballot to vote less than a week before the election. This is planned.
Forgive the public for being a tad confused.
How long do you think the post office recommends?
About 3 days, 2 to 3 days.
They're saying at least a week.
A week?
They're saying at least a week for your vote.
I just don't trust the mail. That's true.
You don't trust the mail either?
Well, I just don't. I would like to give, especially during COVID, give them ample time to deliver it.
I don't trust it.
Why not?
I don't know. I'm scared that it might get lost in the mail. I just want to make sure that my vote is submitted.
She's smart.
Like, I see that it's submitted, that it actually counts.
We should point out that official election mail has a logo that we didn't include, and that is supposed to help expedite it, but our results are broadly in line with the Postal Service's own audits. The Postmaster General declined our request for an interview, but in an email, the Postal Service told us it's committed to delivering election mail in a timely manner. It also says it can handle the expected surge and that it is working with election officials to help with that effort and to educate the public.
Hey, stop right there. Do you think the Postal Service has its own version of the deep state? You bet your ass it does. What voter fraud? Hey, listen, Demi is in the studio. Did you hear her meow? You might hear her behind in the background. So the U.S. Postal Service is no more prepared for this kind of explosion in volume. Oh, you know what? I think we're not going to do any more promos. I'm just going to let you know this for right now, folks.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
The U.S. Postal Service is no more prepared for this kind of a massive explosion, or maybe it's an implosion, in volume and demand than the man in the moon. This is literally unprecedented in the history of the Postal Service. But you got to understand, that's the point. If you can Cloward Piven the U.S. Postal Service, you help Trump lose. So let's be clear. There is a massive differentiation between voting by mail and absentee voting. In voting by mail, everybody gets a ballot sent to their mail. Your dog, your dead Aunt Phoebe, people who lived in your apartment 10 years ago. Now, with an absentee ballot, because that's how I voted for years, I had to purposely sign up at the voting office, provide ID, and swear that I wouldn't go to my local polls in order to vote twice. Because that's voter fraud. But wait, what voter fraud? There isn't any voter fraud. Because the U.S. Postal Service is now under President Trump and people are questioning the ability of the Postal Service to deliver the volume anticipated, the Postmaster General is a guy named Louis DeJoy, and so he's in cahoots with Russia, right? Did you guys hear that? That was Demi. That's Demi the studio cat. I hear that and I gotta laugh. So, why wouldn't you want to tear down every occupier of a position during the Trump administration? And so they went after the Postmaster General. But I want to tell you this. Did you know? They don't, clearly. I don't know if you can hear the cat, but it's funny. It makes me laugh. I'm sorry. Did you guys know the Postmaster General is not appointed by the president? The Postmaster General is appointed by a postal board of governors with advice and consent of the U.S. Senate. He has nothing to do with the Postmaster General, but he's still there to be a target.
There are many inaccuracies about my actions that I wish to again correct. First, I did not direct the removal of blue collection boxes or the removal of mail processing equipment. Second, I did not direct the cutback on hours at any of our post offices. And finally, I did not direct the elimination or any cutback in overtime. I did, however, suspend these practices. to remove any misperceptions about our commitment to delivering the nation's election mail. Any further assertions by the media or elected officials is furthering a false narrative to the American people.
It's typical of how this hearing has gone, and what's amazing to me is this bill had to be rushed out this past Saturday. You remember, do you know that 67 members did not even take the time to show up?
This is Representative Ralph, oh gosh, I can't think of this guy's name.
If your workers at the post office don't show up, what happens? They don't get a paycheck, and the mail doesn't get delivery. It's an insult to what the Democrats are trying to do, a false narrative that has not worked for them since this president was elected. The Mueller report, the impeachment, none of it's working now. They're going fishing for this. I apologize to you. Let me get some yes or no answers. Are you and the Postal Service actively removing mailboxes at the behest of President Trump to undermine the election? Or, as President Obama said, kneecap the Postal Service?
No, sir.
Was the U.S. Postal Service going to be insolvent before the election if you did not receive the $25 billion the Democrats insisted in including in their bill?
No, sir.
Is the United States Postal Service equipped to handle voting by mail for the November election?
Yes, sir.
Are you unlocking blue boxes to stop the mail?
Anything with blue boxes is stopped. No. So.
Congressman Palmer showed pictures of the burned out mailboxes and the cities on fire, Portland, Chicago, Minneapolis, Sacramento, New York. Would that kind of slow the post office delivery down?
There are certain actions and procedures that we have for situations for public unrest that we deploy a variety of different things up to and including getting our collection boxes out of there when it happens. But I don't know all of everything that goes with that. But yes.
So again, this was a massive nothing burger by the Democrats to stir up silt and crap. Then there's the post office itself. The post office itself is the deep state. Administrators at the top come and go. No bias there, right? Stuff that's been going on for long before President Trump arrived. This is from CNN. Report. U.S. Postal Service improperly enabled workers who helped the Clinton campaign. This is back in 2017 that I found this. A government investigation concluded that the United States Postal Service improperly coordinated with the postal workers union that supported the Hillary Clinton campaign. The investigation is documented in a report from the Office of Special Counsel, said the USPS granted employees union leave time off at the request of the union to do political activity, which OSC concluded was a systemic violation of a law regarding the political activity of federal employees. The bias for... Can you guys hear that? The bias for Democrats is deeply ingrained and institutionalized in the Postal Service. I don't know if you guys caught this, but I wanted to play this for you. This is Attorney General Bill Barr, who is on CNN. And essentially, he's had enough of Wolf Blitzer's crap. So these two are having a tete-a-tete, and the topic of discussion is mail-in voting.
So let them send it in. The email, the voting by mail, and let them go vote the ballot. Let them send in the ballot, and then let them go vote. And if the system is as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote. It sounds like he's encouraging people to break the law and try to vote twice.
Well, I don't know exactly what he was saying, but it seems to me what he's saying is he's trying to make the point that the ability to monitor this system is not good. And if it was so good, if you tried to vote a second time, you would be caught if you voted in person.
That would be illegal if they did that. If somebody mailed in a ballot and then actually showed up to vote in person, that would be illegal.
I don't know what the law in the particular state says.
You can't vote twice.
Well, I don't know what the law in the particular state says and when that vote becomes final.
Is there any state that says you can vote twice?
Well, there's some, maybe that you can change your vote up to a particular time. I don't know what the law is, so I'm not going to offer.
He was saying test the
Well,
system.
if you know what he's saying, why are you asking me what he's saying?
He doesn't believe in the mail-in voting. You're the Attorney General of the United States.
Why don't you? Yeah.
He said if you expand mail-in voting, this is the president.
This is,
it's reckless.
Well, this is a, sort of cheap talk to get around the fundamental problem, which is the bipartisan commission chaired by Jimmy Carter and James Baker said back in 2009 that mail-in voting is fraught with the risk of fraud and coercion.
But since then,
and until this
administration, haven't proved it.
Let me talk.
Yeah, please.
And since that time, there have been in the newspapers, in networks, academic studies saying it is open to fraud and coercion. The only time the narrative changed is after this administration came in.
And I'm going to show that to you tonight.
But elections that have been held with mail have found substantial fraud and coercion. For example, we indicted someone in Texas, 1,700 ballots collected from people who could vote. He made them out and voted for the person he wanted to.
Yeah. So what voter fraud? Voter fraud exists. Some people actually tell you how they do it. I found an article called Confessions of a Voter Fraud. I was a master at fixing mail-in ballots. A top Democrat operative says voter fraud, especially with mail-in ballots, is no myth. Oh, myth. And he knows this because he's been doing it on a grand scale for decades. Mail-in ballots have become the latest flashpoint in the 2020 elections. While President Trump and the GOP warn of widespread manipulation of the absentee vote that will swell with COVID polling restrictions, many Democrats and their media allies have dismissed all those concerns as, oh, that's terribly unfounded. But this guy, the political insider, who obviously spoke on condition of anonymity because he's afraid of prosecution, imagine that, said fraud is more the rule than the exception. His dirty work has taken him through the weeds of municipal and federal elections in Patterson, Atlantic City, Camden, Newark, Hoboken, and Hudson County. Those are all in New Jersey. And his fingerprints can be found on local legislative, mayoral, and congressional races all across the Garden State of New Jersey. Some of the biggest names and highest office holders in New Jersey have benefited from his tricks, according to campaign records. An election that is swayed by 500 votes, 1,000 votes, it can make a difference, he said. It can be enough to flip states. I bought this book. Do you remember back in 2004 when I was listening to Hugh Hewitt a lot? He wrote a book called If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat. And it's true, so remember the phrase. So this guy, whistleblower, whose identity, rap sheet, and long history working as a consultant to various campaigns were confirmed, by the way, by this reporter, says he didn't just change ballots himself over the years, but he led teams of fraudsters and mentored at least 20 operatives in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. That's just 3 states. That's just 3 areas. You know, Obama says there are 58 states. Well, there's a bunch more states than just New Jersey. The fixers and the fraudsters are all leftists in nature or Democrats. A Bernie Sanders diehard with no horse in the presidential race, this fraudster said he felt compelled to come forward in the hope that states would act now to fix the glaring security problems present in mail-in ballots. What voter fraud? Then here it comes. He would have his operatives fan out, going house to house, convincing voters to let them mail their completed ballots on behalf as a public service. That's called ballot harvesting. The fraudster and his minions would then take the sealed envelopes home and do what? Hold them over boiling water. Yeah, that's ballot harvesting. That's legal in California. Always spell it with a K. He then would remove the real ballot, place the counterfeit ballot inside the signed certificate, and reseal the envelope. 5 minutes per ballot tops, he said. And the fraudster confirmed what we already suspected. Now we know. He said sometimes postal employees are in on the scam. You got a postman who is a rabid anti-Trump guy and he's working in Bedminster or some Republican stronghold. He can take those filled out ballots and knowing 95% are going to be Republican, he can just throw those in the garbage. And I got stories about that. In some cases, mail carriers were members of his work crew and would sift ballots from the mail and hand them over to the operatives. Nursing homes, great for ballot harvesting, great for Governor Cuomo. Hitting up assisted living facilities and helping the elderly fill out their absentee ballots was a gold mine of voters, he said. There are nursing homes where the nurse is actually a paid operative, and they go room by room by room to these old people who still want to feel like they're relevant, said the whistleblower. They literally fill it out for them. Then, when all else fails, the insider would send operatives to vote live in polling stations, particularly in states like New Jersey and New York that don't require voter ID. The best targets were registered voters who routinely skip presidential or municipal elections. Information, by the way, that is publicly available. What voter fraud? The tipster guy said New Jersey homeless shelters, there's a mine to be tapped, offered a nearly inexhaustible pool of reliable, meaning buyable, voters. They get to register where they live, and they go to the polls and they vote. He said, laughing at the roughly $174 per vote Mike Bloomberg spent to win his third mayoral term. He said he could have delivered the same result at a 70% discount. Like when Frank Poopy Raya, a real estate developer and Hoboken nabob, was convicted last year on federal charges for paying low-income residents $50 a pop to vote how he wanted during a 2013 municipal election. Imagine that. What voter fraud? And the inaccuracies and the inefficiencies of mail-in balloting have already been proven in New York. Here come the stories that I found about New York. Over 80,000 mail-in ballots disqualified in New York City primary mess. This was as of August 5th, just a month ago. The mail-in ballots of more than 84,000 New York City Democrats who sought to vote in the presidential election were disqualified, according to new figures released by the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections received 403,103 mail-in ballots for the June 23rd Democrat president primary. But the certified results released revealed that only 313,995 mail-in ballots were counted. If that happens for the Democrats, do you think that Republicans have a choice? That means 84,108 ballots were not counted or invalidated, 21% of the total. A fifth. Over a fifth. And that's just a sampling what's to come nationally. What if a full 1/5 of national ballots in this November election weren't counted? If it's not close, they can't cheat. What voter fraud? And primarily, whose ballots wouldn't get counted? Correct, Republicans. Because, by the way, if you're not familiar, if you look, the R and the D are printed on the outside of every ballot return envelope. It's at least the ones that I've seen in California always spell it with a K. 1 out of 4 mail-in ballots were disqualified for arriving late, lacking a postmark, or failing to include a voter's signature or other defects. The Post reported Tuesday that roughly 30,000 mail-in ballots were invalidated in Brooklyn alone. But hey, who's counting? What voter fraud? This is the perfect scam. Absentee ballots uncounted because the New York return envelopes are prepaid metered mail. And to be counted, ballots must be postmarked with a date. But in New York, guess what? Prepaid envelopes aren't postmarked with a date. So what happens? That's just New York. That's just New York. There are 57 other states to be concerned about, according to Obama. Then there's voter fraud in Nevada, of all places. Nevada? What are you thinking about that? Well,
earlier this month, President Donald Trump tapped Vice President Mike Pence to head up a commission on voter fraud. Vice President Pence should start his efforts right here in Nevada, where the motto of our voter...
By the way, this is Victor Jakes of the Las Vegas Review-Journal newspaper.
The registration system should be trust, don't verify. It starts with the voter registration form, where applicants simply have to check that they're both a citizen and will be at least 18 by the time election day rolls around. No proof required. Trust, don't verify. That information goes to the Secretary of State, and they try and confirm the Social Security number and the driver's license number on that application. The problem is that non-citizens can get both driver's licenses and Social Security numbers. Again, there's no proof of citizenship required. Trust, don't verify. And even if you don't have a Social Security number or a driver's license, no worries, there's a loophole. Simply sign an affidavit saying that you are legally allowed to vote and you don't have a Social Security number and a driver's license, and presto, you're allowed to vote. Trust, don't verify. Now, liberals like to mock President Trump for saying that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, costing him the popular vote victory. But here's the problem. Voting in elections aren't like a dinner theater where the actors come out at the end and tell you who done it and how they did it. In fact, anyone who successfully commits voter fraud has a strong incentive to never tell anyone, because voter fraud is a crime. So how many people voted illegally in 2016? We don't know, because our voter registration system operates under the premise of trust, don't verify.
So you'll never know. Well, is there voter fraud in, I don't know, Florida? Apparently, boxes of ballots are discovered in a Democrat operative's rental car at the airport in Florida. And President Trump warns Americans about the peril of mass in voting. Well, was there a problem?
And to represent his interests, to make sure that there are not illegal votes that are put into this system. That's it.
Well,
Very simple.
How many illegal votes have been put into the system so far? How many as of now do you know of?
You heard the rules. I'm not going to.
All right.
Don't know.
They don't know, and they're not going to tell you, because they don't have to. So, what voter fraud? The weird thing is, in the process of doing show prep for this tonight, I found one Democrat who gets it. One actual Democrat who gets it, who thinks that voter fraud is real. Specifically, ballot harvesting.
Hey, everybody. We're getting closer and closer to Election Day now, and it is
Tulsi Gabbard.
Critical to remember that the strength of our democracy lies in the integrity of our elections, that every one of us has to have faith that our vote will count. But right now, there are still many states in our country that allow for something called ballot harvesting. This is a system that allows for third parties to collect and deliver ballots for other people, potentially large numbers of people. Unfortunately, ballot harvesting has allowed for fraud and abuse to occur by those who could tamper with or discard ballots to try to sway an election for or against a certain candidate or party.
So 5-year-olds know this. Tulsi Gabbard knows this. But the rest of the Democrats are magically struck dumb.
Now, our vote is our voice. So whether in the midst of a pandemic, as we are now, where mail-in voting is likely to drastically increase, or even in a normal election, no one should get in between a voter and the ballot box. Now, while some states have prohibited vote harvesting or ballot harvesting, many have not, which again allows for abuse from third parties collecting and mishandling ballots.
Third parties collecting and mishandling ballots. Hold that thought. That's where I made my startling revelation that I'm going to let you know about in just a bit.
This is something that we've actually seen happen in recent elections. Now, to protect the integrity of our vote in our elections, I've introduced legislation called the Election Fraud Prevention Act with my friend
She's going to Democrat hell for having done that.
Representative Rodney Davis. Our bipartisan bill protects the chain of custody for every one of our ballots by prohibiting funding from going to states that allow this practice of ballot harvesting to occur. This bill will actually encourage states to stop this practice that's ripe for fraud and that poses a serious threat to the integrity of our elections. We urge our leaders in Congress to take up this legislation quickly to support and ensure the integrity of our elections.
I'm shocked. But like I mentioned earlier, why is it just that primarily Republican ballots get lost? You know, like air quotes, lost or misplaced. Or in the case of this story, tossed in the garbage. FBI investigates ballots for Trump found in Pennsylvania garbage. September 24th. Just maybe about a week ago or so, the Justice Department on Thursday said the FBI opened an investigation into 9 absentee ballots, 7 cast for President Trump, that were found in the garbage near Scranton, Pennsylvania. Trump routinely expresses doubt about the reliability of mail-in voting amid the COVID-19 pandemic, yada, 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 and there's an investigation over that. This is a Fox story. But what's interesting about that is even Fox News is burying the lead, because if you read the story, these aren't really absentee ballots in Virginia. These are mail-in ballots. The nomenclature is incorrect, and the difference is extremely important. A lot of this stuff occurs in Virginia. Why is that? Virginia counties see multiple absentee ballots sent to more than 1,000 voters. Multiple absentee ballots sent to more than 1,000 voters. More than 1,000 Virginia voters who applied for absentee ballots have received an extra one in the mail. State Republican Party officials said Friday. The mix-up, it's a mix-up. The mix-up comes shortly after a Democrat push to expand absentee voting in a bid to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. As a result, absentee ballots no longer require an excuse, and any registered voter is allowed to request one. We knew the Democrats' many last-minute changes to our election law would make our elections less secure. Last minute. Purposeful. But no one could imagine voters receiving 2 ballots, Rich Anderson, the state's GOP chairman, said in a statement. Republicans knew it. Why didn't Democrats know it? Oh, they knew. They knew all right. They knew it was going to benefit themselves. Occasionally, however, there is good news. A saner heads prevail. Recently, on the 27th of September, an appellate court halts Wisconsin ballot counting extensions. Why should you be able to vote past Election Day? It's called Election Day. A federal appeals court temporarily halted a 6-day extension for counting absentee ballots in Wisconsin. Why? Because you're a Democrat. The decision by the 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals is a momentary victory for Republicans and President Donald Trump in the key presidential battleground state. That's true. And what they also said is temporary. Yeah, that's true also. Now's the time where I made some unusual discoveries. This is the time where it might pay to focus a little bit like a laser beam. Because I'm not going to Bigfoot myself. Let's just go, okay? Why should anybody be allowed to vote after voting day? Polls have closed nationally I looked at all the states, by midnight at the latest. Some close at 7, some close at 6:30, some close at 8. There was voter fraud occurring in Virginia even before the Democrats officially began pushing for mail-in balloting due to Wuhan 19. This is the story that got me saying, I wonder if...
First tonight, we're looking into something a lot of you are asking about.
Okay, this is from ABC 13. ABC 13 News Now in Virginia.
In the mail, about 500,000 people got applications to request absentee or mail-in ballots. The concern? People hadn't asked for those applications, and in some places, the addresses for the registrars were wrong. That was the case in Fairfax, so Evan Kozloff from our Verify team is getting answers.
Okay, you understand the problem? People got ballots who hadn't asked for them, and the information on them was incorrect. And so that's going to lead to confusion.
The Verify team is here to help you figure out what's real and what's not. And over the last week, we've been flooded with emails about a confusing mailer in Fairfax County.
And there's too much confusion out there.
Camille Miltz from Great Falls, Virginia, received one of those mailers. It included an application for voting by mail in Virginia, but the return address was wrong.
And it says Fairfax, Virginia. And I live in Fairfax County. And I know this isn't my registrar's office.
And the same thing happened to many in Fairfax City.
Smell test. Smell test. By the way, I'm not doing promos anymore, so I just want to let you know about this. And yes, that is the cat in the background.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
They received the application in the mail, but the return address was to the registrar in Fairfax County. So let's verify. Were these applications sent out by the government? Okay. And if not, who was responsible? Our sources are Fairfax County, Fairfax City, the Virginia Department of Elections, the Center for Voter Information, and the Smith Edwards Dunlap Company. We started by looking to both Fairfax County and Fairfax City for comment. Both put out alerts about this mailing. Fairfax County called it potentially misleading.
Correct.
Quote, while the mailing may appear to be from an official government agency, the Fairfax County Office of Elections did not send...
Okay, that is key to what I'm going to tell you in just a minute or so. The mailing may appear to be from an official government agency.
Fairfax City wrote something similar. Quote, this is an independent organization unaffiliated with the City of Fairfax Office of Elections. So let's focus on the group that actually sent this. The Center for Voter Information, which is listed as a social...
CVI, Center for Voter Information. I'm going to tell you all about them.
Actually sent this. The Center for Voter Information, which is listed as a social welfare nonprofit by Charity Navigator. The
nonprofit for charity.
Organization says that their mission is to register voters in what they call the rising American electorate, meaning young people, people of color, and unmarried women. The goal of these mailers was to get people to apply for voting by mail.
Nobody wants to create confusion or cause problems during this election
No
cycle.
one.
Certainly we don't.
No.
Tom Lopatch is the CEO for the nonprofit.
Remember his name, Tom Lopatch. I'm going to tell you about him later.
He said the mistake was due to a printing error, something confirmed by the CEO of that printing company, who called it a major error. The mistake led to approximately 500,000 of these mailers being sent out with incorrect return addresses.
Half a million. Half a million.
The nonprofit said that the city addresses and the county addresses got flipped in Fairfax, Franklin, Richmond, and Roanoke.
We are already working with local election offices to make sure that they can collect vote-by-mail applications and at our expense ship it to the correct jurisdiction.
The Virginia Department of Elections confirmed in a statement that applications sent to the wrong office...
Okay, Jack Alexander in SHR Media chat just said, CVI are active in Texas, too. My house has been sent multiple mail-in ballots. Oh, Jack. Oh, Jack. You don't know the half of it, mister.
...will be forwarded to the correct one. So we can verify that the mailings did not come from the government. Rather, a nonprofit, which...
But the point is to make sure it appears as though they are from the government.
...says this was a mistake. With your Verify, I'm Evan Kozloff.
Okay, that sounds on the up and up, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound like ABC 13? I think they're in Fairfax. It sounds like they did a damn skippy good investigation. Okay, stop right there. Because that's where that investigation ends. So the TV station essentially is saying, hey, nothing to see here. We've done all the inquiries necessary that you need. Case settled. Move on. They're insisting. So, okay. Demi is following Sean into the other room. What happened with ABC 13, like all the rest, is they have incurious minds, like most journalists today. I don't. I wanted to know more. My nose perked up. Something didn't pass my smell test. So these mailers were sent by a nonprofit and nonpartisan private group called the Center for Voter Information. They're nonpartisan because they say they are. You believe that? I have the internet, as opposed apparently to a lot of journalists. So let's look, okay? Under About Us on the website, two people are predominantly featured. The first one is Paige Gardner, listed as CVI's founder and board chair. Who's Paige Gardner? So I decided, let's look. She's an author at Huffington Post. Well, that's a clue. She's on influencewatch.org when I went to the internet that I actually have and made an inquiry. She's listed there as Paige Gardner is a left-of-center activist who runs the Voter Participation Center, formerly the Women's Voices Women's Vote organization. Gardner works to try and register unmarried women to vote. Unmarried women tend to vote Democratic. And furthermore, in the very next paragraph, she has an admitted and documented history of doing exactly what happened in Virginia. It's there, ABC 13, if you want to look. They're nonpartisan. Gardner worked for Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign and maintained professional ties to the Clintons. She attempted to register voters to help Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2008. She faced criticism after Women's Voices Women Vote registration mailers in North Carolina went out after the primary election registration deadline, confusing some voters. That's purposeful. That's on purpose. Gardner's tactics to try and register people to vote have drawn criticism, imagine that, from election officials all over the country. She has been accused of using misleading mailers, among other things. And that's exactly what occurred in Virginia. And this, too, is in her history. I found this where? On the internet. In 2016, the Voter Participation Center sent out letters in Colorado that said government document enclosed on the front. It also said that recipients were either 18 or about to turn 18, although most recipients were already registered to vote. Gardner defended the letters by saying the states don't keep lists of people who were not registered to vote, and they had to create the list by other means. But wait, there's more. In 2020, similar letters were sent out by the Voter Participation Center across the country. Many of the recipients believe the letters came from government agencies and not from an outside group, which they are. Exactly what occurred in Virginia, except across the country. In addition, some letters were addressed to family pets. Some election officials believe the letter contributed to voter confusion. Imagine that. Voter confusion. Come on, man! Why shouldn't my pet register to vote? Paige Gardner did the exact same thing with the Voter Participation Center. Since 2004, the Voter Participation Center claimed to have signed up 2.7 million voters. However, the group's efforts have been criticized for being imprecise, misleading, ineffective, and potentially illegal. Moreover, the group's ties to the Clinton family and the liberal agitation group MoveOn.org have drawn questions about the group's purported nonpartisanship, which they say they are, which was said in that investigation, and it says that's what they are. If you go to their website, they're nonpartisan. So, okay, this Paige Gardner, his true or her true identity, I discovered also revealed here. The Voter Participation Center was founded under the name Women's Voices, Women Vote, a 501c3 charity focused on registering single women to vote. Paige Gardner, a former Democrat operative whose first race was the late Senator Ted Kennedy's 1980 presidential bid, and her friend Chris Dressner, founded the original Women's Voices, Women Vote group. John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign chairman and a senior aide to President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama, was also said to have helped launch the Women's Voices, Women Vote prior to the 2004 presidential election and later served on the board. That website contains, you go there, it contains an assload more information and detail about the lovely Paige Gardner and her friends. Yeah, that Paige Gardner and CVI, they are stultifyingly unaffiliated. Paige Gardner is listed here also at the Women's Voices Women Vote Action Fund, described as Ms. Gardner was a pioneer in recognizing unmarried women as a key political population and was one of the first to identify and understand the implications of the marriage gap. Remember the mineshaft gap in Dr. Strangelove? Here's the marriage gap between unmarried and married women in their registration and voting behaviors. This is me holding up my hand. Hey, folks, I speak leftist, so I'll translate for you. Married women can go to hell. They tend to be more family-driven, obviously, and they also tend to be a wee bit more conservative. She is further described as an innovator in metrics-based voter registration and turnout outreach. Innovator. Euphemisms for 500, please. Not wanting this guy to feel left out, I mentioned him earlier. The Center for Voter Information About Us also mentioned that guy Tom Lopak as CVI's chief executive officer. So Ballotpedia.com says Tom Lopak is a Democrat political advisor in the state of Montana. He served as chief of staff to Governor Steve Bullock, a Democrat, from 2017 to 2019, when he began serving on Bullock's 2020 presidential campaign. Lopak is the former executive director of the Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee, the DSCC, and former chief of staff to Senator John Tester, Democrat, Montana. Tom Lopak worked for Bill Clinton. Ding, check that box. Ted Kennedy, ding, check that box. John Tester, ding, check that box. And the Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee. So, do you see the running theme here? These people, come on, man. These people are totally unaffiliated. Something tells me that in the process of doing this, I was beginning to identify something of a trend. I don't know, call me crazy, but Paige Gardner doesn't really sound unaffiliated to me. Or Tom and the Center for Voter Information doesn't really sound unaffiliated to me. Instead, it sounds rather affiliated or affiliated. So, hey, I speak leftist, so I'll translate. Paige Gardner's site lied about being unaffiliated, and ABC 13 Virginia Beach conducted a shallow, biased, lazy, and shitty investigation. Air quotes, shitty investigation. And this is where I honesty and clarity, I believe in it, and I always apply it to me. So, this is where I readily admit, obviously I'm into overtime. I readily admit I am no journalist. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not a rocket scientist. I do not play one on TV. I don't claim to be. All I am is an ancient, hairy, obese reprobate with a blog and a radio show. But I also have something else that a lot of these people apparently don't have. A curiosity and a willingness to do the job the American media maggots want. And something that apparently the American media maggots don't have access to at work. It's called the internet. One additional point, I didn't discover this. I had to point this out. I have to tell you this. I decided not to go to Google for this. I started to, and then I thought, you know what? I bet I find what I want on any other search engine but that. So I went to DuckDuckGo. That's also called a clue. Then I went back to Google. Guess what I didn't find? So we have to ask ourselves, why would the Center for Voter Information, clearly partisan, clearly biased, and deeply affiliated with the Democrats and leftists, why would they have conducted themselves in this manner in the state of Virginia? In my opinion, one reason only. One, voter fraud. And this is how those who want to commit voter fraud acquire. This is how they get your signature. This is how they get your information. This is how they get your party affiliation. You know, so they can direct others to recognize which Republican votes or votes for Trump others can pitch in the trash. Because, and this is all my opinion, because do you think all of these organizations don't talk to each other? Of course they do. Why? They're all the same people. Then there was the recent James O'Keefe video from Project Veritas. Oopsie. Here we discover that ballot harvesting and outright voter fraud, either by intimidation or for cash, is occurring in Ilhan Omar's district with the Somali population. So it appears that James O'Keefe went to downtown Minneapolis
at the scene of the crime. The person you're about to meet, Liban Mohammed, a.k.a. King Liban 1, boasts about the hundreds of absentee ballots in his car.
Numbers don't lie.
You can see my car is full. Look at these. My car is full. All these ballots are for Jamal Osman. Look, 300 ballots for Jamal Osman.
There was video. You can see the video. There was a video out and about that he has the ballots in his car. Right. And talking about the only way you can win is with money. I was looking at them, and they were not filled. They were blank.
Who is the one filling out the absentee ballots? People who work with, like Ilhan Omar. Where do they pay the money? The minute we sign the thing, the election, that's what you can pay.
Money is everything. Money is the key in this world. If you ain't got money, you should not be here, period.
So the ballot harvesters request the ballots. Yep. And the ballot is taken from the elderly? Yes, it's taken from the elderly.
There's 3 towers called 1 tower. Okay. And it's all seniors, and they took every ballot.
Every ballot? They just take them from them?
Every single ballot. They knock on the door and say, your ballots come, give it to me, give it to me.
They don't even pay them for it. They just take them.
No. And the ones that didn't vote on ballots?
They didn't pay the elderly because they can just steamroller them. They just took them.
The young people and the women and stuff, they were paying cash. They were getting bags of money the last time we were here to drive people. So there's a vested interest, but we are victims of the system. They don't give a shit about any Somali.
2 in the morning,
imagine
still
that.
hustling.
Who is the one filling out the absentee ballots? People who work with, like Ilhan Omar and other candidates who work for them. They came to us, to our apartments. They tell us that this year you're going to vote for Ilhan. You don't go nowhere, you stay home, we will tell you fill out for your absentee ballot. When it comes, we'll come and get it. You just don't go nowhere, you stay here. So you fill out for us.
They'll just stay here. We'll take care of everything. We'll fill out the ballot for you. How wonderful is that? Thank God for Ilhan Omar. Go to the Project Veritas site itself. There are a ton more videos there. Visit the site. Now, in that vein, the New York Post wrote, Minneapolis police probing alleged ballot harvesting plot helping Representative Ilhan Omar. This is from September 29th. This is very recent. A police investigation has been launched into the alleged ballot harvesting plot, helping Progressive Squad member Representative Ilhan Omar. Imagine that. Allegations of voter fraud being evaluated, the Minneapolis Police Department announced on Monday on Twitter, hours after President Trump called for investigation into the misdeeds. What voter fraud? What voter fraud? The force added that no further information is available at this time, including whether the Democrat Congresswoman would be involved in the initial investigation. How do these people keep getting? How do they skate? How do they keep skating? Because now, in 2020 America, they run everything because all the people that should have been paying attention, including the Republicans, haven't been paying attention. So are we done with Democrat voter fraud? Is my show done? Nope. Like the other illustration that I was talking to you about, Virginia, all they would have had to do is go to the internet. Something I did, my own little fat self, in my house. Biden's Texas political director implicated in massive mail-in ballot harvesting scheme in Harris County. This is from September 28th. Biden campaign operative in Texas is attempting to rig the 2020 election with the help of others in a massive ballot harvesting scheme, according to two private investigators who testified under oath that they have video evidence, documentation, and witnesses to prove it. With the help of mass mail-in ballots, the illegal ballot harvesting operation could harvest 700,000 ballots. One Harris County Democrat operative allegedly bragged. 'Cause why not? Listen, that's a significant accomplishment right there. The investigators, a former FBI agent and former police officer, claim that Biden's Texas political director, Dallas Jones, perfect name, and his cohorts have been hoarding mail-in and absentee ballots and ordering operatives to them fill out for people in Harris County illegally, including dead people, homeless people, and nursing home residents in the 2020 presidential election. See a standard running theme of who we're going to tap. Then let's transport ourselves magically over to Brooklyn, New York. Nearly 100,000 Brooklyn voters got the wrong ballot return envelopes. Let's see, when was this? This was last year, wasn't it? No, September 29th. The New York City Board of Elections on Tuesday admitted that nearly 100,000 Brooklyn voters received absentee ballot return envelopes with the wrong address and names labeled on them. By this time, you're finally recognizing voter fraud. What voter fraud? Smell test. Now let's go over to Queens. Report: New York City voters wrongly received mail-in ballots labeled for military use. Queens, New York City. Voters have received mail-in ballots marked for military use, even though recipients never served in the armed forces, according to a Monday report. What voter fraud? And at this point, I cannot leave out the GOPs, the guilty overeducated white people in Colorado. Colorado Secretary of State encourages non-citizens deceased to register to vote. This is September 27th, that article. Democrat Colorado Secretary of State Gina Griswold sent a postcard to non-citizens and the dead, encouraging them to register to vote so they can cast ballots in November. 'Cause why not? Griswold sent a mailer to several people who are not eligible to vote, CBS 4 reported, in a swing state that has a U.S. Senate seat on the ballot this year and could prove pivotal in the presidential race. If it's not close, they can't cheat. Karen Anderson said she received a ballot addressed to her mother, which sounds really nice, except my mother has been dead for 4 years and hasn't lived, voted, owned property, worked, or done anything other than visit Colorado since 1967, she told CBS 4. There are a bunch of other examples, a dozen other examples, including a deceased woman in Las Animas County, 6 migrant workers in Otero County, a Canadian in Douglas County, a man from Lebanon in Jefferson County, and a British citizen in Arapahoe County. And for good measure, I got to report this from San Francisco. Where's my phone? Because you need to see this photo. Do I have this photo? Let's look. Oh, come on. Come on, man. Damn it. I don't have this photo. Maybe I can take a picture of it. This is from Pennsylvania. This is a story from October the 5th. Oh, yeah, here we go. Oh, this will be a good picture. Okay, this is a story from October 5th. DA files charges against Allentown election judge who darkened dots on ballots in Pennsylvania House race. Okay. Lehigh County District Attorney Jim Martin on Monday announced charges against an elections judge in Allentown's 3rd Ward who was accused of tampering with ballots during the Democrat primary race for state representative between Enid Santiago and Peter Schweier. Damn it didn't take the photograph. Well, I can't show it to you. It's a transvestite. Everett Erica Bickford was charged with 2 election code violations, insertion and alteration of entries in documents and prying into ballots, both misdemeanors. That's just the tip of the iceberg for this show. And I'm going to see if I can take that photograph because you really need to see this lump of crap. That's my opinion, by the way. Factually, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Let's see. Okay, for whatever reason, my phone isn't working. It's not taking photos right now. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And it's time to wrap up. Look, let's be honest. There is absolutely, as I've proven, no reason that people can't vote in person in November on the 3rd. There is absolutely no need to flood voters with mail-in ballots, and no reason to crash the U.S. Postal Service, which, in truth, isn't even remotely prepared to handle the crush. This is purposeful. This is the Democrats trying to place ballot turds in the National Punch Bowl in an effort to confuse voters and sow anarchy across the United States. This is no coincidence. This was all planned. So the next time somebody asks you a question something similar to, well, what voter fraud? Point them here.
Monsieur has unlocked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. You want to contact me? I am really active at BZEP on Twitter, at BZEP, at BZEP. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and also by the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going, and Pratt & Whitney Engines Thrust. You can trust. Tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I shall be consorting in less than an hour, we tried upgrading to the new Boeing platform. Boeing is not going to sell me that. I'm going to have to keep my KC-135. I know that's disappointing. So tonight, thanks to John Truman Wolfe for being here. Thanks to you for listening. I will be back Thursday night with Shannon Wright to talk about her race for mayor of Baltimore. And in the second hour, Dr. Michael Jones is going to talk about the Constitution and what this election means. Come back.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob. What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing? Good night.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.